Hello, welcome back. Things are looking really good. I plotted two more data points for the number of deaths over the last 2 weeks. I had to estimate one of them, but it's looking like things are getting better and better all of the time. Let's go ahead and look at our model in MATLAB. And let's also look at some other information about hospitals and oh, ventilator use, and we can come up with some theories about what might be going on. Okay, so first of all, I've added these last two data points to our data for deaths. I checked the one this morning, the last one for week 25, and week 24, I did a best estimate of that based on, I didn't record it directly, but I was able to get a number for what would have been one day ahead of that, and then just added a little bit to it. So that's a little bit of an estimate. I'll go back and make sure those numbers are more accurate later, but they should be pretty close. Since I'm not so sure about 24, what I want to do is look at what happened from week 21 to week 23. So if we look at that data, the number of people who died was 12,489. That's the total, whoops, the total since the beginning of the pandemic in New Jersey, minus how many there were in week 21. So over that 2-week period, 958 people died. Okay, so that's tragic, but we can compare that to what happened from week 23 to week 25. Okay, so if we look over that 2-week period, we now have 13,018 deaths, but back in week 23, we were at 12,489. So let me raise this up a little bit so we can compare the numbers directly. So from 4 weeks ago to 2 weeks ago, 958 people died. But from 2 weeks ago to the present, only 529 people have died. We've almost cut the number of deaths, the death rate in half over that period of about a month, right? And during the past month, we've also been loosening everything up. So we know if we go back a month, we're at the end of June. That puts us at the end of May. That was the beginning of Memorial Day weekend and more things. Phase one of the opening of the economy. So the A values should have been doing nothing but getting bigger. Okay. In fact, if we look in our model from week 21, okay, up through week 24, I have the A value inching up, okay, because we've opened things up. Now, I thought the A value would go up a lot more than it has in order to match the data, but those seem to be numbers that are working to match the data that we have for deaths. Now, let me show you that I did, in fact, match the data for deaths with those A values. If I run the code, the magenta data points are the deaths, the total number of deaths as a proportion of the population. All right. So we've divided by the 9 million roughly. And now we have a nice, a curve that fits that data very well. Okay. Now, what we're interested in isn't knowing how many people did die, but predicting what will happen in the future. So if we go to plot choice 6, we can see, oh, and let me just show you back with the A values. You can see that from week 24 upward, I just slowly raise the A value. So essentially, I'm raising it about 0.1 per week because if we open it up faster than that, it doesn't seem to match what's going on in the country right now, or I'm sorry, in New Jersey right now. But we can play around with those numbers since these are future numbers. You could play advisor to Governor Murphy and raise those numbers faster and see if we could get back to the way it used to be faster without causing too much, without a large number of deaths being added. Okay, so we don't want to see the number of deaths go way up. And in fact, people seem to be relatively happy with being able to open up a little bit every week. So it might be a good strategy to just open up slowly and see what happens. It's a lot harder. Places like Texas where they're needing to go backwards, it's going to be a lot harder for people. So we seem to be on this steady march towards numbers which represent opening up a lot. And let's see what happens if we do plot 6 over 60 weeks, so a little more than a year. We want to see what's going to happen. And let's look at the whole scale. Okay, so look at the blue lines and the magenta lines on this scale. All right, we can see the susceptible population plummeted during that first wave. Looks like with these numbers, we're not going to really have a significant second wave. It'll be a very minor second wave. And by the time we're right here at where the shading changes, it looks like we're at approximately 60% immunity right now. All right, if we wanted to check that, we could look at how many are removed or recovered, I should say. That's at week 25, 2501. And when we look at that number, 58.5%, okay, have recovered. Okay, that means we're all sick. So about, probably close to 60% of the population already was exposed according to this model and is now immune. Now, we don't know if that immunity will hold forever, but it seems like it's certainly holding in the short run, which is allowing us to be in good shape. Okay, so that also means that we only have about 40% of the population left being susceptible. When you read some things in the news about Sweden opening up and shooting for herd immunity, I think the magic number they're shooting for is about 70% of the population being immune. So we're nearly there, which could account for why this virus, the effects of the virus seem to be dropping rapidly in New Jersey. And it seems like simple things like wearing face masks when out in public are keeping these A values low, even though people are going out and about and starting to shop and do a lot of the things that they once did. So this looks like what we have now. Let's look at the infection curve more closely, though. So let's move this down to about 15%. And we can see, it looks like maybe things will start to go up again in the fall. Okay, so it looks like the fall, by the way, which week would that be? That would be 3/4 of the way through the year. So we can take 0.75 times 52. The beginning of school is right around week 38 or 39. All right, and things tick up a little bit. Well, you'll notice in week 38, I just assumed, since we're opening schools up, that we would start to have A values that are relatively high again. Okay, so I have it up there at 2.5 when we've been looking at numbers that are much smaller than that throughout the summer. I'm expecting there to be a little bit of a surge in the fall, but it'll be very small, according to this model, compared to where we were back in March. You couldn't even see it on the other scale. Now let's go down further just to look at the data for deaths. So Y max is 0.015. Let's go out to 0.025. Okay, and we can see that the deaths go up, but not a lot after the first part of the year. Okay, so if we look at where we are right now, D of 2501. Okay, we're at 0.15% of the population. If we want to get a numerical value, take that answer times 9 million. And you can see that's right around 13,000, as we would have expected. If we go all the way out to 60 weeks, let's find, D of 6,001. Actually, I'll just go to 6,000 in case it ends there. And we can see it only went up proportionally by a small amount. And if we take that answer times 9 million, okay, it looks like we're at about 16,500. So when you consider we have 13,000 have died in the first 25 weeks, by 60 weeks, only a couple thousand more people may have died of COVID-related complications. So that's good news. We've really seen the worst of it, and we may see a slow and steady summer of this. and by fall, things may go up a little bit because of opening up, but not a lot. Let's see what happens if we take that out to about 80 weeks or even 100 weeks. Let's go with 104 weeks. That'll be 2 full years. This would assume we have no vaccine, but we stay immune. And if we run this, whoops, again, okay, we can see the infection rate really dropped. So after 2 full years, if we have not come up with a vaccine, but people do stay immune, that's out there at 1,040, say, okay. D at, I'm not quite sure that that number is right. Whoops. D, I maybe went too far. Let's see. Okay, so 104 weeks would be 104. Oh, we need to do with 2 zeros because we multiply by 100, and that should give us right. Okay, so we're seeing about 0.2% of the population would have been would have died because of the virus. And if we take that answer times 9 million, that would put us around 18,000 2 years out. Okay, so here we are after less than half a year of this at about 13,000. 2 years after the beginning of it all, we may have be at 18,000, which is only another 5,000, which is a lot of people, but relative to the population of New Jersey, it is a small amount, and it looks like life would begin to return to normal, because by the end of 2 years, you can see the infection curve has nearly dropped back down to 0. In fact, let's look at that full scale. So if we go to Y max being 1.1, if people stay immune, we'll see that the infection rate drops very close to 0. So we will see, the susceptible population is just trickling downward after that. And the people who are immune, that number trickles upwards. And it looks like it'll level off asymptotically around 80% of the population being immune. So that means 20% of people never had to get sick. Hopefully, that means we've isolated the most vulnerable people, so they wouldn't have to get sick. And then after that, there will be very few infected people out there, so be very safe to come back out. Okay, so we may be seeing the number, the deaths dropping off significantly just because the number of susceptible people is dropping significantly because so many people are immune. What could also be going on, let me switch around, so let me pause this. Whoops, I think I still was recording during that whole time. Sorry about that little delay. I think I never stopped recording. I thought I had. Let me just check. Nope. So here's data from New Jersey hospitals. So I have 2 other theories about this. Okay, one, we may have just reached such a large number of immune people that things are dying off. Another theory might be that we're just getting better at treating this. So the death rate may be dropping because our treatment has improved significantly over the 25 weeks of the pandemic. All right. So let's look at some data from hospitals. Okay. So if we look at hospitalizations, at its peak, it looks like there were about 8,000 people in hospitals. Today, it's more like 1,000. So we're looking at 1/8 of the number of people who are hospitalized as had been hospitalized before. Okay, so that's showing that a lot fewer people are getting sick, and those who are getting sick maybe aren't getting as sick. Okay, but more importantly, if we compare that to the number of people who have to be in intensive care, at its peak that was around 2,000, and now it's dropped to about 200. Okay, so that's at about a tenth of what it had been. Okay, so notice a tenth is less than an eighth. Okay, so there could be two reasons for that. One is that our medical treatment is better. So people who show up to the hospital are treated effectively and don't have to go to um, intensive care at quite the same rate, or they get out of intensive care faster. They recover more quickly because of some of the medicines. All right. Even more encouraging is the ventilator use. At its peak, we had about 1,600 people on ventilators, and now we're down to about 200 people being on ventilators. Notice that that's actually fairly comparable to the number of people in intensive care. I think those are two separate numbers, um, not a total number of. I think the people on ventilators, they may be in intensive care. So perhaps most of the people in intensive care who are left there are in fact on ventilators. But it looks like those numbers are coming down faster than the numbers of hospitalizations. So I'm suspicious that either we're getting better at treating COVID, or perhaps it's not quite as fatal as it had been at the beginning. Okay, so you may read some news stories saying that it may be weakening in terms of its how uh, often it kills people. We may be looking at a weaker strain of the virus, which is often something that a virus does, because when it kills people, they're not around to infect others. So viruses often become weaker as they mutate, um, because they can actually infect more people and kill fewer of them. Because the goal of the virus is not to kill people, it is to replicate. Okay, a successful virus is one that will replicate frequently. So there may be several reasons why the numbers of, let me stop the screen share here, go back to the video. There look to be three possibilities in my mind of reasons that the death rate is coming down so dramatically. One is that the number of susceptible people has dropped dramatically. Two, we may be getting better at treating people. And three, the virus may be getting less fatal. Okay, so any one of those options are good. Maybe there's a combination of all three. But given the number of people who are immune, New Jersey, that would explain probably why New Jersey's better off than a lot of the states in the South. If the virus were weakening, we wouldn't see states like Texas and Florida and Arizona having such troubles right now, unless they have a different strain of the virus out where they are. But I'm suspicious that the main reason is, my first guess is that the number of people who are immune in New Jersey must be getting significantly high, and we may be approaching herd immunity. Now, the thing we have to look out for is we have this graph that is coming down. We don't know if we're going to hit a bounce where it goes back up. You could see right around the opening of school, when I increased the A value dramatically, we did get a little bit of a bounce, but we may or may not see that. So if the data keeps heading downward on deaths per week over the next few weeks, that's a good sign. If it stops dropping downward, then we may need to revise our model. Our A values may be going up, and maybe the 0.25% death rate isn't the death rate we should be using. At this point, I'm pretty sure that the 1% is overly pessimistic, as well as the 0.5%. And it may even turn out that the 0.25% is a little bit pessimistic. So we'll see. We'll touch base perhaps in about a week and see what the numbers are doing. All right, take care.